Hello everyone, this is Oscar from Underdog, and today I want to talk about slowing down and speeding up. It can be so satisfying in a musical production when something starts slow and then speeds up. It's a pattern we recognize and that we anticipate. It's also really nice when something starts fast and then slows down. It really stretches out our sense of time. And stretching out our sense of time is a really welcome thing to do in electronic music, where we tend to be kind of stuck with a quantified grid where time always flows in very measurable quantities. That it can be so refreshing when something breaks those measured quantified grids and just goes running away quickly or slowing down. So today I want to offer you 3 techniques that you can use to get this kind of psychoacoustic effect. As usual, I'm explaining them conceptually. You can use whatever software or DAW you want to apply these. Let's hop into Ableton Live and I'll show you what I mean. Before we go any further, like the video and subscribe to help the channel grow. Leave a comment to show me some love. But without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, here's a little composition I've been working on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just remove all the synths, just to leave just this drum groove. And that's what we're going to work with. So over these drum grooves, I'm going to show you the 3 techniques. 3 techniques to speed up and slow down time. Now, the first technique is the simplest one, which is based purely in the piano roll, and that's called the Ratchet. When you're programming drums, usually I would advise that people work on a grid of 1/16 right here, right? And then you usually just program a couple of hits. Like, for example, a little snare hit like this. This is a little snare hit just taken from the Amen break, right? But what you can do is you can implement a ratchet. And what a ratchet is simply squeezing more notes into the same space. So, for example, putting 1/32 notes in here. So if you don't put any of these 1/32 notes in here, listen to this pattern. Fine, but we're not exactly speeding up or slowing down time, right? But let me add the ratchets and show what that sounds like. You hear how suddenly the grid becomes almost twice as fast. It feels as if 1/16 note is no longer the smallest unit of time, but 1/32 note is. It's a similar concept to, for example, if you have all of your drums hitting on 1/8 notes, and then you add 1/16 notes, it's going to suddenly sound twice as fast. If you've got all your drums on 1/16 note and you suddenly add 1/32 notes, then suddenly things are going to feel twice as fast again. Especially with snares, it's a very satisfying feeling. It really feels like kind of a marching band. Even though it's super mechanical and electronic, it still has a certain kind of a speeding up aesthetic to it. That was tip number 1. And now tip number 2 is, instead of programming in the notes individually, what we're going to do is we're going to program in one note, one big long note of 2 bars, and we're going to feed it into an arp. And that arpeggiator, we're going to set the rate to free, like right here. You see this? And then we're going to automate the speed of the arpeggiator. We're going to automate it. It starts at 300 and something milliseconds per note that it spits out, down to 36, back up to 300. Let's see what that feels like. Let's go again. If you curate this thing properly, you can easily get to something that gives goosebumps and that is very, very exciting in a production like this, because these notes don't fall exactly on the grid. They fall somewhere in between, but we can still see the mathematical pattern of the speeding up and slowing down. Because, you know, if you think of music as like maths solving problems, like our brain kind of decodes music like it's kind of sound geometry, right? We kind of look for the mathematical patterns in it. And so we can simply perceive this pattern of speeding up and slowing down, and we see it clearly next to the grid. It doesn't confuse the musical message. Now you can do the same, and instead of just putting a drum hit there, instead you can put a synthesizer that plays a preset like this analog noise preset on Diva. With a bit of tweaking, you get something like this. So you can then tweak the cutoff. You can, of course, automate that cutoff as well. There we go. So from dark to light and back to dark. This can be a really cool effect, for example, in a break or to mark a transition or something like this. And similarly, instead of a noise synth, you can put a nice synth in there. I fed that same note into a chord plugin, which just generates secondary notes next to it. And then that arpeggiator is going to just do the up style. And with the exact same automation parameters, we're going to get something like... You see, you might have felt something like this happening in music before, and now you know how it's done, basically with a free-form arpeggiator, or a free-rate arpeggiator. That's what it's called, apparently. So those are 3 variations on the arpeggiator technique, and now let me show you also the LFO plus filter technique. So the third technique is where you take basically a very simple patch. Here, this is just Ableton stock. It's a nice enough patch. Then you're going to add a filter on top of it to make it dark, to cut away all the high frequencies. And then we're going to put an LFO to modulate that filter frequency. And then we automate the rate of that LFO. You hear that? That's a very kind of Max Cooper kind of a vibe for me. I feel like I've heard a lot of artists do this. I could just listen to this all day as an ambient piece. Let's see with the drum beat. Yeah, that feels exciting enough that it could even be the start of a new track. I just want to listen to it one more time. So one little key here is, of course, looking for the sweet spots of the automation so that it doesn't go too fast and it doesn't go too slow. So it just still feels like the pattern is evolving, but people don't lose track of it, so to speak, you know. So you have to tweak the settings a little bit to find like kind of the goosebump moments, but basically that is it. Remember that also very often the LFO can be built into your synthesizer. You just have to somehow automate the rate of the LFO. I did it here with an external LFO and filter because it's more visual, but if you know how subtractive synthesis works, and if you don't watch this video, and this video. If you know how subtractive synthesis works, you know that most synths have filters and LFOs built into them. And so you can use the LFO to modulate the filter cutoff and then speed up the LFO and slow down the LFO using automation simply in Ableton's timeline view like this, or whatever DAW you use. If little techniques like this are helpful to you but a bit overwhelming and you feel like you need a structure from beginning to end to learn the basics of electronic music, go check out my Foundations of Electronic Music course. It's made with absolute beginners in mind to help you through getting to the point where you're finishing your first compositions. The music in this project will at some point come out under Face the Sun. Go follow Face the Sun on SoundCloud and Instagram right now. Come show us on the Discord channel what you did with this. And until next time, stay producing, be good to one another, and take care. Bye-bye.